Hey, welcome to a very long overdue episode of Chad's Beer Podcast Archive Edition. I haven't posted one of these since November, so it's been, 4 months or so, 5, something like that. Anyway, this episode is on Mark Starr. He was also known as the Grand Old Hopry. His channel is still there, but he hasn't posted anything in a long time, obviously. So you can see... he actually got some pretty big views. So let me sort these by most popular. Look, he's got a 16,000, 9.2 thousand. He was one of the first people, maybe the first person, to review Pliny the Younger. He's got Westy 12. He was a person that got me into Hopslam. I actually did a beer trade with Mark, and that was back when Hopslam was still like a whale, like a chaser beer. He always had a pretty cool beer cellar. Yeah, you can actually see it right here. It's kind of a rack. And but he has like this, like, I don't know if that's his basement or his living. I think it's his actual basement. He has like a furnished basement. I remember he was in, I believe it was Kansas City. And I believe he was a Chiefs fan, but I could be wrong if I remember that. Mark and I did a review of the Six Glass by Boulevard. I remember he was a big Boulevard fan, and this is before Boulevard was as huge as they are now. But yeah, and it's funny now. I'm a pretty big Boulevard fan, although because their stuff's like really good and actually fairly cheap. So yeah, check out Mark's channel. It's got some of these reviews still hold up today. He got pretty close. He got 806 subscribers, pretty close to 1,000. Did 259 total videos, and even though he hasn't posted in 13 years, he got 192,000 total views. That's actually pretty impressive. So yeah, check out his channel. And anyway, so here is a podcast, I guess you could call it, that I did with him. I believe it was 2010 or so. I'll put the exact date somewhere. So hopefully we'll have a new guest next week or real soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you for the beer reviews. Cheers. Hey, welcome to another episode of Interview with a Craft Beer Enthusiast. Tonight I'm talking with Mark Starr from The Hopry. How you doing, Mark?
How's it going? Good. How are you?
Good. Where did the name The Hopry come from? Just another hop pun?
It's kind of a hop pun, but if you think about all the beers out there, all the IPAs that have hop in the name, way before I even started the website, I thought, what would be the greatest name for an IPA? And I'm a huge old country fan, and when I say old country, I mean like 50s, 60s, 70s country music. And of course, growing up watching the Grand Ole Opry, I thought, how cool would it be to have a beer called the Grand Ole Hopry? So I started off as the Grand Ole Hopry. In fact, my YouTube name is still the Grand Ole Hopry 1. But I didn't, I thought, hey, what if I have world domination one day and they come at me and say, you need to stop using that name. So plus when I started my website, I wanted something really short and easy to remember. So the Hopry was born.
Yeah. I have a list of the typical questions I ask the other BeerTubers. I always like to start at the beginning, your personal history. What is your history with beer and alcohol in general? Were you raised to appreciate the artistry, or did you just learn that on your own?
Well, as a kid, I didn't really, when all of my friends in high school were drinking beer, I really didn't drink beer because I just didn't like the taste of it.
Right.
And I guess I realize now that I was actually smarter than they were because the things that they were drinking were just not that good. But after I got back from Desert Storm, I got into the restaurant business, and this was back in the early 90s, and became a chef over the years, and really kind of, developed my palate along the way. And when you have a palate and a sense of imagination, it'll really take you anywhere. And I love flavors, whether it's beer, whether it's spirits, whether it's wine, whatever. So, and I think really within the last, 2 to 3 years, the real eye-opening experience for me was my first taste of Bell's Hopslam, and that just, as many of the people watching this will know, that was kind of a aha moment for me. So.
watching your videos, I always get the feeling that you're like very experienced and knowledgeable. How would you describe your personal knowledge and experience with beer?
Well, first of all, thank you. That was really nice of you to say. But again, I think most of it comes from reading. Most of it comes from tasting. Again, going back to the whole concept of having a palate. If you have a palate, if you have nostrils that work, which these do, and you have eyeballs that can help you look at a beer, I think that, you learn the language, you read the books, you read the magazines, you do whatever. And that's really, I think, where I'm at. I mean, and I'm not, saying that, being, a certified Cicerone is, unneeded or not a good thing. I think that, it's a great thing, but I just don't feel like, I really need that to appreciate beer. If people needed that to appreciate beer, far less people would be drinking it.
Right, or to appreciate your reviews too. Speaking of judging, rating, grading beers or whatever you want to talk, when you're drinking a beer, especially for the first time, like or shooting a review, for example, like what goes through your head as you're pouring it, smelling it, tasting it? How much emphasis do you place on taste versus aroma, appearance, all that stuff? What's your method to your madness?
It's very easy for me to review a beer because the first thing I start off with, my starting point is basically how much do I like this? And so let's just say that liking this a lot is 90 out of 100.
Right.
I think really you go up or down from there, and you could start that number anywhere. You could say that I start every beer at 50, or I start every beer at 100, and I let that beer work its way down to 0, and we'll see how far it goes. But, for me, if a beer looks really good, if it smells really good, and it tastes really good, I mean, how can you not think that that's an A beer?
Right.
I've had beers where I thought they tasted really good, but frankly, they just didn't look that great. And so those are the things that you have to take into consideration. I've also had beers that looked really good, tasted really good, but I couldn't smell anything when I poured them in the glass. So again, it's like, you have to find that point where it's like, okay, in my head, I'm thinking this is about a 94 out of 100 beer. I don't like the way I can't smell anything, so maybe it's a 93, 92, 91, whatever.
Right.
So, but that's, it's not rocket science, and my opinion is just my opinion. If people respect my opinion enough to get mad at it or agree with it, then hey, that's great.
Yeah. Kind of getting back to one of the earlier questions, it sounds like you've been a very enthusiastic about craft beer and like you said, wine and spirits for what, 10, 15 years now?
Yeah, I would say probably 10 years is fair.
What made you want to take it a step further and say, even though I am an enthusiastic consumer and drinker of this product, and now I feel the need to blog about it, I want to start a webpage, I want to do videos. Were you doing a blog first, then videos, or did you just do everything at once?
I really did it all at once. It kind of came together, simultaneously. But, I mean, like all of us, I used to get on YouTube and do, searches for Dogfish 120 minutes and, whatever other beers that you can think of. And I used to see everybody doing these beer reviews. And, I thought, why not do it myself? Because, when you start something like this, you never know if 10 people are going to watch it or 5,000 people are going to watch it.
Right.
And I never really set out to do it for, world fame or anything like that. In fact, I'm pretty positive that I will never have that. But for me, doing video is so important because it's something that I feel is going to be watched for a long time.
Right.
I feel like even though I like to read, I prefer to watch. So it just, it just came natural to me. I wanted to talk about beer. I really wanted to make it a visual diary for myself. So when I'm 50, 60 years old, I can look back and say, hey, this is what I did. And it's kind of a time capsule. So,
was there any hesitation to do a video instead of just text? Because there's a certain anonymity that comes with just doing text, but doing video is a lot more, putting your face out there.
I always wanted to do video, and I do text on my website, mainly because I want to, I guess, add something to the review that maybe I forgot to add, in the visual component of it.
Right.
But no, video has always been, important to me.
I would say that you and I are both pretty not only enthusiastic but knowledgeable about beer. How do you personally explain to the Joe and Jane six-packs out there that, no, this Imperial Stout does not taste like soy sauce, or that to us, their fizzy yellow beer tastes like carbonated corn water?
Well, you have to be really careful about people who drink the yellow fizzy water, because really I feel they're more brand loyal than they are, really defending the beer itself. And I don't really try to push anything off on people. I think if you approach these, folks, like whether it's family members or friends or whatever, kind of with the attitude of, look, I don't really care if you like this or not because I didn't brew it. But, at least try it and at least find something positive about it. I think you're going to eventually find something that you really like. And I think that really kind of, I guess, drops their guard a little bit and allows them to open up. And a lot of people, like, for example, we reviewed the Boulevard beer earlier.
Right.
They have a Boulevard Pilsner. And it really tastes like Bud Light, but it's just made really well. And you can tell the yeast is better. You can tell there's no corn or any other adjuncts in it. And it's just a lot better beer. And I think when they drink that and they tell how much better it is, they kind of think to themselves like, wow, I just drank something that wasn't, Bud Miller or Coors. And you can kind of find gateway beers into getting those folks into beer.
Have you found yourself kind of steering people in that direction? And if so, have you followed up on it or?
Honestly, Chad, I've turned a lot of people on to craft beer, and it really does feel good. When you see somebody taste something and they kind of light up a little bit, it's a great feeling. Mostly in-laws and close friends, but
right.
Right now I think the kind of really big beer out there that has a lot of people's attention, who are at least adventurous enough to move away from Bud Miller and Coors, is Blue Moon. And even though it's brewed by Coors,
right,
I can tell someone, hey, if you like that beer, try this Belgian version of it. I want you to pay attention to the yeast character in it, and if you don't know what that means, I'll explain it to you when you drink it, or a Hefeweizen or something like that. And again, it takes getting people to associate with something on their own, to really kind of, I guess, get them into the craft beer world. And I think the correlation between the wheat beers that we have here with the Hefeweizens and then slowly working them into the Belgian beers is really the best way to go. And the thing that I find to be completely interesting is that, I know a lot of people that drink Guinness, and I'll say, have you ever had North Coast Old Rasputin?
Right.
And when they try that beer, they're just floored. They're like, wow. And it's funny because that's such an intense beer, but it just proves, and I always point it out to them, that your palate is capable of a lot more than you think. So,
yeah. What is the goal of your channel and your blog in general? Are you trying to convert the BMC drinker to craft beer, or are you already going for people like me and other craft beer enthusiasts to just, hey guys, this is what I think about this? Or is it both?
Well, the number one thing would be, again, it's just a video beer diary for myself. Number two, I think,
so it's
is
egotistical.
Huh?
So it's egotistical.
No, I mean, it really is. It's for myself. I mean, because I'm the one drinking these beers, and a lot of times, it's the first time I've had them,
Right.
and so I want to share them with you guys. But number two is, really just sharing it with, folks like you and people who really are adventurous. I think the advocacy part of it really kind of happens offline for me. I don't feel like people who are drinking the Bud Millers and Coors are going to search out my website and decide that they really want to try craft beer based on what I've done.
Right.
And I'm hoping that along the way, I've picked up someone who has, through another friend or a magazine or whatever, read about, or had a beer that they really liked, and they went out to do some research and happened to fall upon my site.
Right. On your channel, you tend to review beers that you seem to have you could make an educated guess are going to be good beers.
Mm-hmm.
I never see you reviewing, Bud Light Chelada or anything like that.
And you won't.
Right. So is that how you approach your channel? Like you're not so much a consumer advocate as just I want to just only sample the good stuff?
It's not so much about just sampling the good stuff, though I'll be the first one to admit that a lot of the beers that I review on the Hoppery are, very good beers.
Right.
But when you educate yourself as a customer or a beer lover, you find lists out there online that really point you in the right direction. And a lot of those beers are just ones that I read about. And they pique my interest, and I want to go, find those. But as many of the folks who know what we do, meaning recording a session, editing it, going through the whole 9 yards, I just have never found myself really wanting to waste my time drinking beers that either I know or the public has, reviewed or stated are not that great of beers. I will tell you that I absolutely love getting a beer that I'm hoping is going to blow my mind and ends up being an 82 or a 78 beer, because the one thing that I, really push for on my website is being 100% honest about my scores. And if I think a beer is an 82 versus a 95, I am so happy to give a beer an 82. So it's not just about drinking good beers.
Right.
But I share beers that I think are going to be good. Sometimes they're ones I've had, sometimes they're not.
When you're researching beers, looking at lists and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
do you find that there might be, and this is kind of more a philosophical kind of thing, is would that create a bias in your mind of, and I've argued with this other people is, like because it's listed on this list of the greatest beers ever made,
Mm-hmm.
like if you deviate from that consensus, like your opinion is incorrect. Like I don't know how you approach it, but I try to be as neutral and as ignorant, for lack of a better word, as possible about a beer, so that I'm giving it as honest a review as possible. Like you said, you do a lot of research first. Would you say that maybe? I mean, you said that you're not afraid to say the emperor has no clothes. But do you think that there might be a bias there if you're purposely seeking out the beers that are making these lists?
I don't think that there's a bias, but again, I really welcome those beers that are rated very, very highly by the public, but maybe I don't feel that way about them. And I'm not going to lie and say that public opinion doesn't influence me. I would say that it's a part of probably 20 things that I look at. If somebody thinks a beer is an A+, and I think, wow, it tasted like an A+, but it didn't smell like an A+, or it didn't look like an A+, then I really give it the score that I feel it deserves. And I think at the end of the day, my opinion is always 100% right, and it's always 100% wrong. I mean, it's really up to the viewer to decide. And I think if I give something an 82, for example, and somebody quietly goes, you know what, I kind of agree with you on that, then I think you've really kind of gained that person's respect, because they see that you're able to score something lower than the general public.
Right.
But yeah, it's not rocket science, and it's, it is what it is. It's like, if I give it a 95 or a 94 or a 93, all it tells me is you should go get it.
Right.
If it's an 82, it's a good beer and you should get it, but you shouldn't, knock yourself out for it.
Right. And everybody has different tastes, though, because it's like, I watch some reviewers, and it's like, well, they're stout guys, so if it's a Russian Imperial Stout, they're going to give it the highest grade, but like, they're not hopheads, so IPAs, they tend not to score as high.
Well, Chad, I wanted to bring this up too, but if you watch my review for the Fritz and Ken's Ale, the Sierra Nevada 30th Anniversary Ale,
right?
I had really high expectations for that beer. It had Fritz Maytag and, everybody associated with that beer. And I think Tim and I eventually gave it an 82. And, when him and I worked that offline, I think I was probably closer to the 79, 80, and he might have been 82, 84. And we kind of decided to go in the middle. But, that's a perfect example of a beer that I can go out to Beer Advocate right now and see A-, A-, A+, A-, and I didn't think it was that. So,
kind of along those lines, like, there are certain beers like that, like, they almost have to be aged, especially in the case of like extreme beers.
mm-hmm.
Or like, I appreciate it when breweries tell you on the bottle, like Southern Tier, for example, please use this glassware, please serve it at this temperature.
Yeah.
I always try to review a beer as it's meant to be drank, but, like, there's certain beers, like, take, like, Dogfish Head Roll-By Stout, it's like, you can't honestly even really drink those beers unless they have some age under it. Do you kind of take that into consideration? Like, I got in an argument with somebody recently because he reviewed a beer that was clearly spoiled and contaminated, but he still reviewed it. I was like, that's not really an honest review, because that's not how the product's meant to be drank. That's kind of an anomaly, but in the case of, like, especially big beers, or like, like, even, like drinking Trappist beers that are vintaged. I'm drinking 2-year-old Trappist beer, not everybody else can get this. Is that honestly a fair review, to drink a 2-year-old vintage that nobody else can get?
I think it's all fair game. I mean, every beer is a time capsule, and that's one of the beautiful things about it. You could have a beer that's 2 years old, and it can taste completely different than one that you had that was 3 weeks old.
Right.
And I think that, when you really come down to defending your scores, or, trying to articulate your thoughts on a beer, it's based on the experience that you had in your house and not what somebody else had in their house at that time. And, I've had beers that I tried fresh that I thought, what, this is a good beer, but it's not great. And I've had them 2 years later, and, tears flew out of my eyes. I mean, it's a time capsule, and it's for that moment and that time. And whatever that beer is to you at that time, it is what it is.
Right. Do you have any guilty pleasures? Would you drink a Miller Lite or some kind of macro beer if nothing else was available?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at heart, I just don't really want to support those beers, just because, I think there's already enough supporters. But, if I'm at a football game with family and friends and they've just got a cooler of Bud Light, I'm not above that. I can drink a Bud Light. I mean, in terms of guilty pleasures, I don't really have any guilty pleasures. I'll drink just about anything. I mean, I'm not above beer.
Right.
I just know what I like, and I know what I like to pursue. But if it's a Miller Lite in a can, you know what? I'm at a football game, and really the important thing is just being with my family and friends, and it, so.
What's your opinion of the beer blogging and vlogging scene in general? Like, seems like every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a beer website now, and like when we first started on YouTube, like 2-3 years ago, there was only like a handful of us, and now not that there's like a ton of us, but there definitely is a lot more BeerTubers now.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion of the entire scene? Is is it a good thing, or is it a bad thing because it's saturated, or what do you think?
Well, it's absolutely a good thing because, you mentioned the word saturated, and it may seem saturated to us, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not saturated at all. And I think that it's just like going to Amazon.com. You can see everybody's opinion on that CD you're thinking about buying, or the toilet brush you're thinking about buying. It's, we're all just a bunch of guys with opinions. And I cannot stress enough, though I'm sure some people will disagree with me, I really do this for myself first. It's a video diary for myself first. And that's what's important to me. And I think that because of that importance, I don't allow myself to get caught up in all of the battles over who's the best blog, or, people's opinions on that. I love all of you guys for doing what you do. It's your opinion. A lot of times I can watch your reviews, or, anyone else's reviews, and, and I just love it. I love hearing people talk about beer. And sometimes I'll drink a beer along with the person that's reviewing it. And, sometimes maybe I'll smell or taste something that I didn't on my own. And I think that's a good thing.
What is the future of craft beer in general, especially in the United States? Will we ever be able to own more than 10% of the market share?
Absolutely. Absolutely. With something like this, it really is a word of mouth business. And I wanted to kind of add this to the last question. If you look at a lot of the breweries out there, they really support each other. They really care about each other. They realize that it's a fight. If you watch the movie Beer Wars, you can see how those people, really band together. They do collaboration beers. They go on tours together. And I think we can absolutely change the beer world. And I think that probably folks like you who've, been on YouTube maybe longer than anybody, feels like you've been doing this forever. But I feel like I've kind of been doing it forever too, though it's only over a year. But I feel like we're really scratching the surface. And I think in the next 5, maybe 10 years, the people who really stick with it and catalog a number of reviews, are really going to make something of themselves. And if you take your video reviews seriously, if you take your website seriously, and you do it with love and compassion, and not try to, shit on all the other bloggers and put them down, and, if we all bring each other up together,
Right.
I really think that the craft beer industry is just going to continue to explode.
Even with Blue Moon and Michelob and a lot of like the Canadian quasi-macro things getting bigger, it's like it's kind of inspiring, but at the same time kind of not, because it's like, hey, they're just ripping us off,
Yeah, at the end of the day, it really is just beer. I hate to oversimplify it, but it really is just beer. And, I do think that we will never take down Anheuser-Busch, but, that's fine. I just want, at the end of the day, I want somebody to try a beer they haven't had before, and, try another beer that they haven't had before, and the next day do the same thing. That's really all it's about, is, getting back to a country, and I'm not going to bring politics in it, but it's about getting back to a country that, supports the small guys that are doing something really great. I miss that Americana. I miss the small towns. I miss the hardware store, the mercantile.
Yeah.
And, I really associate that with beer, and that's why I like drinking the small breweries. Not just because they're small breweries, but they just make really good beer. And if you make good beer and you're a small brewery, I will probably come back.
Let's plug your website and your Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff.
Well, it's pretty much the hoppery across the board. So I'll just say, if you go to my website, www.thehoppery.com, off in the corner of my website, I have a link where you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Facebook. You can, always look for me on YouTube. I really just like to always call out my website. Again, Vimeo, YouTube, they're just all places that I house my videos. But where I really want people to go is to my website, because that's where I put my work. That's where my blood, sweat, and tears and staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning. That's where that really goes. So
yeah. Well, I guess that about wraps it up for this interview. Thanks for agreeing to do this, and we have to do this. We'll do a Skype review again sometime.
no problem. It was really fun. I've seen the ones you've done in the past, and I was really excited to get on board. So
yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, and I'll see you real soon.
Cheers.